keep Kenny B in your prayers because he wanted to be here very bad. He's here. Look around. Feel it. He's here. So I made this phone call very early in the year because we know how to do all this. We get it early. And without a hesitation, Tim just said, "No, where is this?" And I told him, he says, "Wow, let me look at my account." Absolutely, I would. And that's what real members of Alcoholics Anonymous do. They just say, yeah. And we come to find out he was the speaker of Founders Day this year. We didn't know that, and we got to hear him there. And we got to find out all these other little threads of you guys that know Tim through the years. I just know that he's got an amazing talk. He's got an amazing home group. He's got amazing guys with him. Our little man, Steve, was with us this morning being of service. And I just want to say, you guys are in for a treat. And I give you Tim H. from Louisville.
I got it, Steve.
Short people, right? Too.
That's right. There we go. Let me get that out there. All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Tim Highland. I'm an alcoholic. Since April 12th of 1990, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink of alcohol or other mood-altering substances, and that's been absolutely, positively the best thing that's ever happened to me. And certainly only through God's merciful divine intervention on April 12th of 1990 am I here at all. And whatever you hear today is only because of God's divine intervention. And just love to be here. Crying Ryan, buddy, I appreciate it. You know, Kleenex's best friend. Yeah. And I want to thank my host, Dunish, and his two beautiful little children over there. I didn't also know you were called the Little Brown Man. Yeah. Yeah. They told me that. Yeah, but it is good to be here. What a wonderful, my sponsor is a little guy named Don M., and he often says that, in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think this is kind of true, about 95% of us show up and we get a home group and we hang out in a home group and socialize, and that's about it. He said, but there's 5% of the people who want it all. They want it all. And, I sense that here. I mean, they want the whole package. They want the home group. They want the service piece. They want to be part of Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. And I really appreciate what you shared there, because that's not the case so many places where the home group kind of exists just for itself, almost separate from the bigger AA as a whole. And so I really do appreciate that, and I certainly can tell just by what you said, and certainly by the feeling in this room. Not everywhere, Clancy talks about pockets of enthusiasm, and it's not every place, but sometimes you come to a place, and even before the meeting starts, you're in for a treat, because you're with people who really want this thing. And the fact that a lot of you traveled here from other places, that just says so much. And so I also want to thank my three travelers over here that came with me, Larry, Mo, and Joe. That's right. No, they're guys that I sponsor, and they love to go on road trips. We love to go on road trips. That's kind of how I was brought up in Alcoholics Anonymous. Get in the car. Where are we going? Doesn't matter. Just get in the car, son, and we're going somewhere. And we've had a great time coming down, and sure we'll do some inventory work going back, right? Yeah. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know about you all, but the state of the world right now is kind of choppy, right? Man, I even hate to turn on the radio, hate to turn on the TV. Everybody seems like they're polarized. It's either on my side, and if you're not on my side, you're stupid and dumb and get out of my life, right? There's no in-betweens anymore, it doesn't seem like, in this world, except when you come to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Nobody here cares what color you are, what sex you are, what your sexual orientation is, where you're from, what your politics is. We don't care. If you want to stay sober and you show up in these rooms, we're glad you're here, Thank God for that, and I enjoy my meetings today so much, because I know that's the flavor of Alcoholics Anonymous, so different from what the world is experiencing now. And I always start off by sharing, because one of my favorite stories kind of ties right into that. My home group is called the Lambton Street Group, and it's in downtown inner city Louisville. I mean, it's down in the hood, man. And as a direct result of where my home group is, probably at least 50, 60% of the guys I sponsor are African American, just like this one. He was one of the first ones. He was one of the first ones. And I don't think a whole lot about it, right? That's where our group is, and that's kind of the way it is. But several years back, I was driving down that way to get on the expressway morning, and I was about 3 blocks now from my home group, keep in mind. And as I was getting on the expressway, I got hit in the rear end. And the guy that hit me was an elderly black gentleman and his wife. And so we're standing in the middle of the street now, waiting for the police to come. Now, keep in mind, I'm only about 3 blocks from my home group. About that time, there come 2 guys down the side of the street, both black. They ran over to me. They go, "Hey, Tim, you okay, buddy? You all right?" I said, "Yeah, guys, go ahead." About that time, 2 other guys came down this side of the street, both African-American. They ran over to me. "Tim, are you hurt? Can we take you anywhere, buddy?" I said, "No, man, I'm all right." But that time, a car came off the expressway. 5 guys in there, all black. They stopped the car, jumped out, came up, hugged me. "You all right, buddy? You okay?" I said, "Yeah, man, I'm okay. Go ahead." I didn't think anything about it, right? I turned around. That elderly black gentleman who was hitting me was standing and went, "Who are you anyway?" And I thought, what can I tell that guy? I'm just a drunk, you know. You know, in our book it says we are people who normally would not mix, but what grows up amongst us is a fellowship that's indescribably wonderful, you know, and it's so true. You know, when I was about 5 years sober, my sponsor, Don, sent me down to Cherokee, North Carolina to speak at a Cherokee Indian Reservation AA conference down there. And you guys, I had never spoken outside of Louisville, so, man, I was so nervous. I'm driving down there, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm not going to fit in. And so I get down there, and I'm the only non-Native American speaker, and I do not look like an Indian. And I get up to speak, and there's the chief sitting there. There's a medicine man guy over here, whatever, and I'm like, oh, man. I get up there, and the next thing I hear myself saying is, "Hey, you guys, you know what? When I was a kid, I used to watch those Cowboys and Indians movies. Yeah, I pulled for the Indians, man. I swear I did, you know." And here was the thing. The chief started to laugh a little bit, and I thought, I'm in. After the meeting, he grabs me and goes, "Hey, come here, boy." He says, "We was kind of worried about you. But when you got up there and told those lies, we knew you was in the right place." Oh, man, you know, you got to love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I love the laughter in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, because when I showed up April 12th of 1990, it wasn't very much funny about anything, right? And you guys were laughing, and I could tell the laughter and the joy was real. And I wanted it, I didn't have it, you know, but you guys simply said, well, just keep following these guys around, and someday you'll laugh and you'll have that first belly laugh, and you'll understand what this is all about, you know, and that's exactly what's happened. And it's so healing, you know, laughter is so healing. And so thank God you guys were laughing, and I hope we can always keep that going in AA. And, you know, for the new people that are here, that's just joined the home group, you know, I always think back 29 plus years ago when I showed up to the AA. Honestly, you know, what I did, I'd sit at the meeting, I'd listen to the speaker, but what I was interested in is what the speaker did that I didn't do, right? And I'd listen intently, and the speaker would be saying this, and I'd be listening, going, well, I did that. Nope, I did not do that. Next night, next speaker, did it. Nope, did not do that. I made it 3 weeks into this, and a woman of all things is speaking, and I'm identifying with this lady, everything she did. I'm sitting there going, man, I did that. I did that. Oh, I did that. Oh, I'm screwed. I did that too. But then right at the end of her talk, she said she used to carry a half pint in her bra. I said, I did not do that. And I told this old guy about it after the meeting. He said, sound like you're getting a little desperate there to me, kid. And I said, you know, but I'm here to see what an alcoholic looks like. And they said, well, kind of like you. I said, oh, no, you know what I mean, dirty old man in a raincoat. And they said, no, we don't know what you mean. And that night at that meeting, no dirty old men in raincoats. Just like today, not a raincoat in the place. Yep, dirty old men everywhere. And here was the thing, you guys, I listened to your stories. Your stories were all different. They were all over the place. But what trapped me and has kept me preoccupied through 29 years in sobriety is there were 3 things it seemed like you always talked about. You were talking about being restless, irritable, and discontent. You were talking about being apart from, not a part of. And you were talking about progressive patterns of dishonesty in your life. And I'm thinking, oh, no, if that's got anything to do with what's wrong with me, I am screwed, because those 3 things have been part of my life from the get-go. Those 3 things I've wrestled with right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 29 years, right? Restless, irritable, discontent. The book talks about it. What is it? I don't know what it is, but I can tell you I got it. I have had it. I identify immediately with an alcoholic because of that hole in their gut. Immediately I know what you're talking about. And when I was 14 years old, I put alcohol on top of that. And for the next 27 years, when that came, whatever you want to call it, that hole in the soul, that the hole that the wind blows through, I took a drink of alcohol. And it seemed at first to be a great solution. The second thing you all were talking about is being apart from, not a part of. You know, and that, there's still a little piece of me, 29 years into this. And I know I'm going to come here and you all are going to love me. But we're driving here and that little voice will go, Tim, you are not one of them. They'll know you're from Kentucky, buddy, you know. You are different. There's a little piece of me that always wants to be different. There's a little piece of me that always wants to pull away from the pack. You know, there's a little piece of me that I think is alcoholism in its purest form. You know, and sometimes we look around one day, I become dust different enough that you look around and you say, what happened to that guy? You know, I back out the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, and that whole feeling of being apart from, not a part of. And I think only sometimes we in Alcoholics Anonymous understand it, because you almost have to be an alcoholic to understand what that feeling of emptiness and loneliness is, and separateness, you know. I'll share this with you. Maybe this will make sense to you, it doesn't. But when I was in early sobriety, some of the stupidest stuff rang my bell. I like to watch old movies, right? I got 8 grandkids, so at Christmas time we always watch these old movies. My favorite one of all times is E.T., the extraterrestrial. And the reason why, back in the 80s when that thing came out, I was out with some lady that I think I was engaged to, you know. One of those deals, I'm not sure. But anyway, I was all drunked up and we're watching the movie. And if you remember in the movie E.T., right, the little Martian guy, he gets sick and he gets all crinkly and he's dying, absolutely dying. And he looks up in the sky and he goes, home, home, E.T., home. And tears just started coming down my face. And this girl always said, what is wrong with you? I said, I know just how he feels. And I want to tell you, I could tell that same story in church. Nobody gets it. You share that in an AA meeting, everybody go, oh yeah, man. I've been trying to get home forever. And the last thing you guys were talking about was progressive patterns of dishonesty in your life, you know. And what I knew right away was I had lied my whole life when the truth was good enough. I had lied when the truth was good enough, and I knew it. I remember being a kid, you know, 10, 12 years old. I was a pretty good athlete, so if I scored 20 points in the game and you say how many points you score, I'd say 24, you know. Got to be on the test. What'd you get? 10 B plus, you know. I mean, and I remember even thinking, why do you do that, Tim? Why isn't the truth good enough for you? Why do you always have to add to the truth? And I really believe today that somehow intuitively I knew if I was going to grow up and drink the way I wanted to drink, live the way I wanted to live, the truth was not going to work. And I think I got outside of it, you know, knowing that's where I was going to have to be very early on. You know, I was in AA about 3 months and I was back with my family, right? And I had a 13-year-old daughter at that time. And I'm 3 months sober, she's 13. So we're both sitting up at 1:45 in the morning watching The Late Show. You know, I can't sleep because I'm 3 months sober. She can't sleep because she's 13. And so she says to me, Dad, can I order a pizza? I went, oh, honey, no, don't do that. Your mother will go nuts. She said, oh, come on, let me. I said, all right, go ahead. So she orders a pizza about 1:15 in the morning. Doorbell rings. There's the pizza man. Here comes her mother flying out of the bedroom, screaming at her, going, what are you doing getting a pizza at 1:15 in the morning? My daughter said, Dad said I could. My wife said, you said she could. I said, nope. My daughter said, Dad, you're lying. I said, I know what I do it all the time. You know, I say all that to say this, you know, restless, irritable, and discontent, apart from, not a part of, and progressive patterns of dishonesty in my life. What I know today that I didn't know when I showed up, that what I just described is the spiritual, physical, and mental malady called alcoholism and everything that goes with it. A disease of body, of mind, and of spirit, of soul, right? And the good news, if you're new, AA's got the whole package covered, right? We've got these 12 steps, you know, and we've got a fellowship that goes with them. You know, this whole idea of being apart from or being restless, irritable, and discontent, Tim, instead of taking a drink, we're going to hook you up with a new power. Being apart from, not a part of, we're going to give you the great fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and all you have to do is drag your raggedy old butt in here every day. And this last thing about lying and not telling the truth, we're going to give you the 12 steps. And we promise you if you do those steps on a regular basis, you'll be able to live in your truth and be happy and be sober. And by the way, Tim, you can't do any of that by yourself. We're going to give you this fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous in which you must participate. Because what makes those 12 steps work? Only the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous is when we take those 12 steps, we get one drunk eyeball to eyeball with another drunk. The magic happens. And that's why it took me a while to understand, you know, the importance of the fellowship and the structure and the service structure. It took me a long time to understand that the 3 legacies were there for a reason. If we only wanted you to do just the recovery part, we would have told you so. But very clearly, we told you that it only works if you choose to get involved in all 3 spokes. You know, and I say that because I think that's the number one problem we have in our program, right? And I was the same way. Hey, I don't mind being here, but I think I can get by with maybe 80% of what you guys do. And nowhere in the big book did it said, you know, if you do 80%, you'll be 80% sober. It basically said, if you will thoroughly follow our path, thoroughly, which means pretty much do everything we do, you got a chance. And, you know, I say that because I love what I hear here, because obviously this is the whole package. This is all about all of it. It's about recovery. It's about unity. You know, we got in the back and said a beautiful prayer together before we came in here. Those are the things they did in the old days. Those are the things I think that have slipped a little bit out of some of the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, it really makes my heart glow to come to a place where you guys are just embracing the whole package, man, because it's not that way everywhere. But anyway, I'll share with you, I grew up in an Irish Catholic family in the west end of Louisville. It wasn't if you were going to drink, it was when and how good were you going to do it, right? I mean, if you walked into my house, my daddy put something to drink in your hand. You know, I mean, we had the priest from the Catholic Church, the nuns from the Catholic Church, you know, the postman. I mean, they're all guys were in there. He almost had the Jehovah's Witnesses guys in there one time. Almost had them. But, you know, that's just the way it was, you know, and I guess I looked forward to it. And the reason I look forward to it, I tell you, alcohol worked for me before I ever tasted it. And what I mean is, I was the oldest of 7 kids, right? So we'd be sitting at the kitchen table waiting for my daddy to come home, and if he didn't stop at the tavern, then you knew what was coming through that door, right? Restless, irritable, and discontent. But I'd watch him come in that kitchen. He'd reach up and get that Yellowstone whiskey. He'd pop him a big old hit of that, and then he'd open a can of beer and go, bup, 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 and his head would go, and I'd be sitting there going, man, that felt good, you know? I mean, I'm watching him going, I don't know what just happened there, but I am in. I'm in. Guy told me one time, Tim, if you're catching a buzz at 10 years old watching people drink, you're probably going to have a problem, man, you know? But I say that because, you know, I loved what it did for me. I didn't care what it tasted. I didn't know how to taste it when he was taking it, but I saw what it did, and that's what I wanted, and that's simply the way it was. The book clearly says, you know, I drank for the effect. So anyway, I jumped into it quickly at 15 years old, and what I have to tell you is it did work exactly as I would have had it work. And the truth was, it was a great solution for me as a teenager because I was a goofy, tall, pimply, just clumsy, afraid of just about everything type of teenage kid, right? And so, bam, I got a hold of that booze. It was just the right deal for me. I remember thinking, God, thank you so much. This makes it an even deal for me. I drink a few beers, I can go, baby. I can dance, I can call girls, I can do all that stuff that of myself I just can't seem to do, you know. So I thought God could give me a tremendous solution there when I was 15 years old, and I ran with it. You know, in the state of Kentucky, you know, I say this because I work with a lot of young people today, and I have to remember that I had hopes and dreams and aspirations. You know, I didn't want to grow up and be a drunk. I didn't want to grow up and be an AA. I mean, I never thought of either one of those things. In the state of Kentucky, if you guys are very familiar with this, you're very close to us. If you can shoot a basketball through a hoop over there, you know, that's a big deal, right? And so my whole dream as a kid was to go, is to be a basketball player and get a scholarship to a Division I college. And so my whole life was directed toward that. From 5 years old on, that's all I cared about, you know. Didn't care about school, didn't care about anything else. And that dream came true. You know, when I graduated from high school, I was an all-state player, all-city player. And I got a scholarship to St. Louis University, which at that time was playing in the same league with Louisville and Cincinnati and Memphis State. I mean, it was a big deal. I was the first one to go to college in my family, much less go with, you know, a scholarship and all of that. So my dream had come true at 18 years old. And I say this to you because I fully wanted that desperately, you know, because what I realized was, you know, I didn't have too many other avenues. I wasn't that smart in school, but this was my out. This was my way to be somebody, and nothing can get in the way of that. I showed up to the first game of my sophomore year. In those days, you couldn't play as freshmen, but I showed up to the first game of my sophomore year so drunk that the other players put me on the end of the bench so the coach wouldn't throw me out of school. So this is like going to watch West Virginia or Marshall, whoever your favorite team is, and on the end of the bench, one of the kids is loaded. I mean, totally drunk. And I want to tell you what happened that day, and it was going to happen over and over. I was walking down the street. Guy said, "Hey, you want to get a drink?" I said, "Well, yeah." I always said, "Yeah." Because as I look back, I had a mind that said something like, yeah, I'll go have 2 beers, come back, get a nap, get up, get a shower, go to the game, I'll probably be the hero. Yeah? You know, that's what my mind would do. I'm 18 years old. I don't know anything about a physical allergy or mental obsession. I certainly don't know anything about phenomenon of craving, right? So as you guessed, I drank right up into game time, stumbled into the locker room. And the reason I mention that, that's a huge day in my life because that was the day alcohol went by the only thing that I would have told you meant anything to me. And from that day forward, alcohol and alcoholism would dictate on a daily basis what I did, who I did it with, and especially where I ended up on any given night, right? Alcohol was driving the bus, man. Because from that point forward, it would go by everything that I would have told you I ever wanted. It was going to go by my marriage, my kids, my family. It didn't make any difference. It was at the top of the pile, and I was going to run with it at the top of the pile as long as I could. So at that college, I played for through my junior year, and just was not a good situation. You know, my alcohol and my drinking really prevented me from really doing very well and paying attention to it. And in my senior year, I didn't play. And then it came down to my senior year, and I had to graduate, which means they said, you got to leave. You got enough credits, your grades are terrible, but get out of here. Now, I kind of wanted to stay and keep the party going if I could, you know, and because somebody just mentioned this to me. And that day, in the late 60s and 70s, there was a thing called the Vietnam War. And that wasn't going real great at the time. And, you know, 3 of my buddies already been brought home in body bags. And they had a thing called the draft lottery, where they threw your birthday into a hat and drew your name out to see when you're going. I was number 6 out of 365. I made the top 10, you know, and so baby, I'm going. Now again, I need to tell you, if you're a vet, you know, I was going to go. I mean, I wasn't going to run to Canada. I wasn't brought up like that, but it certainly wasn't high on my priority list either, I'm going to tell you. Now, there were 2 ways you could get deferred from the draft back then. You could get married. I thought, man, that's awful drastic. Or you could go to grad school, right? I said, that's it. That is it. That's my way out of here. And I want to share this with you, the way it went through my head, and I know some of you are going to think I'm really stupid, really crazy. Some of you are going to be right with me. I was a political science major, okay, like a lot of us back in the 60s where we were going to change the world. And so the idea that popped in my head was this. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the test to get into law school. I'm going to pass that test. I'm going to get into law school. I'm going to graduate from law school, and then someday I'm going to run for Congress and someday President of the United States. Dude, it's a short trip from me from street drunk to President of the United States. I can get there, you know what I mean? Crazy. And so I took the test, and as you might guess, I got a terrible score on the LSAT, and the law school turned me down, right? So now, as meager as it may sound to you guys, man, I was in a panic because I'm thinking, Tim, you better come up with a new plan or you're going to be over shooting them up pretty quick, man. And it hits me. Tim, stop drinking. Stop drinking. Study for that test because you got the brains to get into law school. So that for the next 5 weeks, I don't drink a drop, you know. And, oh, man, it was awful. I had to get through the shakes. You know, I found this real smart guy down the hall. He tutored me every day on how to take this test. Everybody else is out partying. I'm studying this stupid stuff, dry as a bone. But I knew I had to do it, right? So for 5 weeks, I gave it the best that God had in me. Came down to the day before the second check. I made a little change to the plan, Ryan. I said, I'm ready. I'm going to go out and have a couple beers so I can relax. Come back, have a good night's sleep, get up, take the test, pass the test, get into law school, Congress, President of the United States. Same plan, one little upfront change if you paid attention there. I left Friday afternoon for those 2 beers. I didn't get back to that campus till the following Tuesday. Found out later on I rode around St. Louis about a day and a half. What I now know today is called a blackout. And honestly, I did not know what a blackout was until I got to AA. I did know. I used to start somewhere, end up somewhere else with a big old chunk of time missing. I didn't think a whole lot about it, If that's happening in your life, that ain't right, But anyway, about 2 in the morning, I was drunk, but sober enough to realize that, I ain't taking the test. So I go back to the dormitory, I find this real egghead smart guy that had been my tutor, and I paid him $20 to go take the test for me. And I'm not proud of that, but also back in those days, you could do that way too easy. So he goes and takes the test in my name. I stayed drunk for the next 3 days. I even forgot he took the test. All right, 3 weeks later, I get the results of the test the guy took in my name. The guy gets the highest score in the history of the law school. It wasn't very funny then, man, I want to tell you that. God, I remember opening this thing up going, you idiot! God, poor kid. I said, look what you've done to me now, man. He said, well, you wanted a good score. So I don't know what was perfect. Let's say 800 was perfect. He got 799. I had like 300 on the one I took. So now I got 2 scores over there, 500 points apart, And I'm thinking I better get to them before they get to me, right? And I called the dean of the law school. Now here it is. Here's the hero child, Mr. Allstate. 4 short years later, standing in the law office of this dean, lying through my teeth, saying, Dean, probably wondering about the difference in 2 scores, huh? I said, listen, I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. I let some other guy take it anyway. How did he do? As if I didn't know, right? And it was an interesting moment because I knew he knew I was lying. And as I turned to leave that room that day, what went through my mind very clearly was, Tim, you know the deal, man. It's the booze. The booze took the basketball. The booze took the law school. You should be doing both of them, and you know it. That moment, it was that clear. I'll never forget it. Certainly, it didn't last very long. I turned around and were 3 guys I knew. They said, hey, you want to get a drink? I said, yeah, you bet, man. I need a drink. That was 1970. It was going to be 20 years until I showed up into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. But here's what I can tell you. In those 4 short years, alcohol and alcoholism took from me the very things I'd fight you over today. Took my security, took my dignity, took my confidence, took my trust in myself. It took all those things deep down inside, I think, as every human being we so desperately want. Call it moral bankruptcy, call it whatever you want. What I know is in those 4 short years, those things were gone. And the reason I know that is for the last 29 years, you guys have helped restore those things back in my life. And I think they're so important to all of us. Sometimes we talk about alcohol and it takes our marriages and it takes our money and it takes our jobs. Boy, it also takes that deep moral fiber that human beings so much need. And what I cherish in Alcoholics Anonymous today, finding those things, and cherish watching young people come in and watch that restored to them, where they become real human beings with a moral code, again, to live by, and that's exactly the way I was. So anyway, I go back to Louisville, I take the draft physical. I flunked the draft physical on a congenital birth defect. I thought, man, that'd have saved me a lot of trouble there. Jeez, God. But that's kind of how it was going, right? So now I'm back home, living with mom and dad, don't have a job, don't have anything else. And I got my first job. Of course, I had a degree, and I played ball, so I got a job as a basketball coach and the dean of students at an all-boys Catholic high school. So what happened there was this high school hired a drunk to be in charge of discipline of their school is what they did. My job was to check all these kids in the morning, right? That was part of my job. And I'm going to tell you this one story because I love it. This is back in the 70s, right? When all the kids are out in the parking lot hitting a few doobies, right, to get ready for class. And I look up one morning, I'm hungover, man, got a big old tomato head. I'm just trying to get to 9 o'clock. I look up his kid. He had that long hair we had back in the 70s. He had that army jacket on, man. You could smell that reefer. And he was just floating over top of my desk like this. And all of a sudden he looked down and went, "Hey, Mr. Highland, you're looking bad, dude." I think I said something like, "Hey, by God, I'm in charge here. Don't you forget that." Listen to this. The reason I tell you that story about that kid that day, this last July, that kid, not a kid anymore, celebrated 37 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's pretty much a multimillionaire. He lives down in Destin, Florida. He's a great member of AA. I went down there to speak a couple years ago. This is great. And he runs up to me. He's got his kids with him. He said, Coach, come here. He said, "Look, I ain't never told my kids now how it was." He said, "I make a deal with you. You don't say anything about me, I won't say anything about you." And I tell you, that's been one of my great gifts in AA, especially the last 10 years. Guess where a lot of those boys I tried to teach and coach in the 70s have showed up? Right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm getting to sponsor some of the same guys I tried to teach and coach back in the 70s. In this one end of town where that school was, invariably, if I go into a meeting in that end of town, one of them will be there, right? And they'll jump up and go, "Ha ha, we knew you'd be here." And I go, "Yeah, and I knew you'd be here too." But that's been a great thing for me. God has given me the opportunity to kind of redo so many of the areas that I fell down in so badly, during my alcoholism. Also, when I came back from college and all my infamy after the law school thing, living with mom and dad, I had met my high school sweetheart when we were seniors in high school. We met around Christmas time. We dated for 6 months. I went off to college in St. Louis. She stayed in Louisville. So for the next 4 years, we kind of had it on and off, love the one you're with type of deal. And so by the time I came back, after the law school debacle, I hadn't seen her, 6 months to 8 months. We had been broken up. But I happened to be out one night and I ran into her. Oh man, did she look good, She looked good, and I know she's driving this little sports car. And then she starts telling me about this great job she's got, about this incredible apartment she had. And I start thinking, I think I'm falling in love here, That was in August. We got married in November of 1970. All right, we didn't want to rush it. And we got married in November of 1970. We got divorced in 1983, but we got remarried in 1985. Divorced again in 1987, but remarried when I got sober in 1990. You jumped the gun, Ryan. Divorced again in 1995. People say, "What is that all about?" Well, I can tell you what it's all about today. Obviously, I didn't know then. It's about alcohol, alcoholism, and everything that goes with it, right? I hate him. I love him. I love him. I hate him. He's good. He's bad. He's bad. He's good. If you don't know, there's a thing called alcoholism in the middle of any relationship. Pretty much an impossible deal, right? And that's why I have a big place in my heart for Al-Anon. Because you guys, if there ever was a family disease, I heard this somewhere today, it's right here. I mean, this is a family disease, and everybody around us gets crazy and gets sick. And so only what you just heard can only happen when you have the disease of alcoholism unattended. And that's basically what you had with us, both drunk and sober. Also during that time, during our marriage, though, we had 3 beautiful children. If you're a father, how about having your oldest son born on Christmas morning, right? What a great gift. In 1971, 9 a.m., St. Anthony's Hospital. I was supposed to be there for that great gift from God, and I missed the gift, I was in the hospital, but I was in the men's room, my head in the toilet bowl, spitting up whiskey, and all I could think about is, I got to get out of here. I got to get a drink, man. I missed the gift that morning, you guys, and I really regret that. Not a Christmas goes by that doesn't come back to my mind. And I need to share this with you, too. My Christmas baby is my oldest son, who is now, 47, 48 years old. And we have had a strained relationship, the whole time. He's the only one of them who took the blunt of my alcoholism. He was the oldest. We've never been very close. And I remember when I was about 6 months sober, right? Just now getting this thing. In fact, I was really getting it. I thought, man, I'm on my way to being the president of AA here. So I'm on fire, right? 6 months sober. And my son says to me one day, "Dad, can I talk to you before I go off to college?" And of course, I immediately think, yep, he probably wants to tell me how proud he is of me that I'm 6 months sober. I bet. So we have our little meeting. I said, son, what did you like to say? He said, Dad, I only have one thing to say to you, man. I said, what's that? He said, Dad, I hate you. I hate you, Dad, and let me tell you why. I hate you because all you talk about is you. Even since you stopped drinking, Dad, all you think about is you. Bye. You know, I was like, I can't believe I'm taking a hit like this at 6 months sober. I made a bad mistake, man. I took the story out to a bunch of old timers in AA. They were not kind. The first guy says to me, Tim, you've been sober 6 months. You think you're getting credibility back. No, you drank for 27 years. You think you're getting credibility back in 6 months. I was like, well, yeah. I mean, my idea was, hey, everybody, let's call it even. What do you say? And I don't know about you guys, but I didn't find anybody that wanted to call it even. And you know what? It's still not even. You know, and what I know today, it'll never be even. It's going to be my job to add to those people's lives that took the blows, you know, till they throw dirt in my face. And then one of the old guys said to me, Tim, you want credibility, huh? I said, yes, sir, I do. I want credibility in AA again. I want credibility as a person. He said, I'm going to tell you how you're going to get it. Tim, you're going to get credibility in AA by not drinking and doing the next right thing one day at a time. That doesn't even sound good to me now. Yeah. One day? You know, he is so right. You know, 8 years sober, 8 years. That older, my Christmas baby called me from Seattle, Washington. His butt was on fire. But he called me because he knew I was different. He knew his old man actually listened to him when he talked. He knew his dad was helping a lot of other people. He knew something had changed. And he said, can I come home and can I live with you, Dad? And 8 years sober, he came home and lived with me for about 8 months, you know. And that healing that you all promised one day at a time had finally gotten enough where he was willing to spend some time with me. And now here we are, you know, 21 years later, you know, and I helped that young man start his own business in Louisville about 6, 7 years ago. He has 3 beautiful little daughters. And I do know this, he loves every minute, every second. Those 3 little girls get to be with their pawpaws. And I'll share this with you. You know, he's a kid strictly came from the environment of alcoholism. He has a hard time with his emotions. I don't think I've ever heard him use the word love in his life, and he's 47, 48 years old. 2 years ago at Christmas, he kind of backed me into a corner awkwardly and said, Dad, I don't know how to say this, but I do love you. He said, but I do know this, and I don't know how to love people. He said, but I do know that I'm so happy that my little girls have never had to see you the way I had to see you, and they don't have to deal with the insanity that we had to see when we were little kids. And I tell you what, here I am 29 years, and you know, and that relationship with him is still not exactly where I'd want it, but boy, I'll tell you what, it's a long way from where, Dad, I hate you. And the bottom line is, if you're new, you know, that credibility was earned one day at a time by not drinking and trying to learn to be a better father, be a better husband, be a better everything. And I learned that from other men in Alcoholics Anonymous. So sometimes it seems like a slow progression, but as you know, that credibility, once it's earned, is like nothing else in the world, right? It's like nothing else in the world. I did the teaching and coaching thing, you know, for about 8 or 9 years, and there were some really ugly things, you know, showing up drunk to the parent-teachers conference, you know, showing up for parent-teachers conference, and some of the daddies that are coming in for the conferences, I had just seen them in a bar. We both left about the same time, you know, that type of thing. Coaching basketball under the influence, having the referees come over to you and say, you know, you been drinking, you know. You know, it just was my way of life, but it prevented me from being any more. It prevented me sincerely from being all the things I would have told you that I would have liked to have been, you know. So I did the teaching coaching thing, and in 1990, I did what every drunk usually do. I started my own business, right? Got to do your own thing sooner or later, right? And I started my insurance agency in 1980. So let me talk to you about the decade of the 80s. Did not go well. Already told you, got divorced in 83, remarried in 85, divorced in 87, remarried in 90. I was engaged to 2 other women in between time. I lived 14 different places. I had 12 different business partners. I got shot at twice. I got stabbed with a beer bottle, and I lost $250,000. And I was thinking, this is going okay. You know? We're always kind of like the last to know, man. I don't know what that's all about, right? From 1982 to 1985, I went through 5 psychiatrists. That was a simple deal. I kept him until he started talking about alcohol. He started talking about alcohol, fired him, got me a new guy. I took every antidepressant they ever made back in the 80s, drinking whiskey and beer every day. And if you're using that recipe, it didn't work real great for me, I'll tell you that. New Year's Eve, 1985, I ended up again. I was living at mom and dad's again. I used to run the guys I went to high school with. They'd say, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" I'd say, "I'm president of my own company." They'd say, "No kidding, where are you living?" I said, "Mom and Dad." New Year's Eve, 1985, living at mom and dad's. And that day I woke up. And that was going to be an interesting day because no matter how much I drank that day, the thrill was gone. The book talks a little bit. We come to a spot where we can't live with it and we can't live without it. That day, no matter how much I drank, I knew my old friend alcohol, which I had met so long ago, which had carried me, I thought, through so many years, was never, ever going to work the way it used to work. And I knew it. And boy, once you know the truth of that, you're in a spot. And I knew it was a point in time where I couldn't live with it, I couldn't live without it, and that was my first visit to the asylum, right? And my brother Tommy drove me up to Our Lady of Peace, which is a place that we have, our nut house, which sits up on the hill, and they checked me in there. And what I wanted to share with you there, because I think this is my alcoholism in a bucket, I was as suicidal as I'd ever been. I just wanted life to be over. I'd lost everything again, lost my kids, lost my wife, business was going down the tubes, and so I was suicidal, but I didn't know how to do that. So they put me back in this little room. I guess it was a detox room. Now keep in mind, I'm out of it. And this nurse comes in, sits down next to me. She said, "Honey, tell me about it." And I remember saying, "Well, okay, I'll tell you about it. 2 years ago, my first wife threw me out for no reason that I can think of. And then I got engaged to this other woman. She took off with the ring, and I haven't even paid for it. Oh, yeah, and I tell you, my daddy went to prison when I was 12, and man, this stuff started popping out of me. I don't know where it was coming from. I noticed I started feeling better and better and better. Nurse looked awful after a while. But maybe we're there an hour, and she looks me right in the eyes, and she said, "Honey, you certainly have a right to feel the way you do." I thought, "God, lady, you are so right. What was I thinking? If people messed over you like they messed over me, by God, you drink too." I spent the next 16 days in there helping everybody else. I did. I thought God sent me there on a mission or something, I had this old drunk minister. I was trying to help him. They made me head of the stress class. I got a blue ribbon for the best ceramic in shop, I was killing it there. Just killing it. Halfway through the stay, I'm walking down the hall one day, and the nurse says, "Would you like a pass out tonight?" And I thought she said, "You must have wanted to pass out tonight, I guess." I said, "What?" She said, "No, you're doing so well. You can go out for a couple hours as long as you're back by curfew." I said, "Well, thank you very much." They're finally understanding who they're dealing with here. And so I called my best buddy. He picks me up to Nut House. We go right to the watering hole, slam down 6-8 beers, get a couple shots, got a big old bottle of wine. I'm telling about all the people I'm helping back to hospital. We just got trashed, man. 11:15, I said, "Hey, I got curfew at 11 back to Nut House. You got to get me back." So we pile in the car. We get back there, and I'm falling out the passenger seat to go back in there, and I look back over. My buddy's just tears running down his face, just crying like crazy. I said, "What is wrong with you?" He said, "Tim, you don't belong in there. I do." And I said, "You know what? I think you're right, and when I get out of here, I will help you, God, guys, and I went in there and I did what I always did. I came out of there and I started over. Got me a new girlfriend, got me a new place to live, got me a new business partner. I was always starting over. And if you listen to our talks in AA, we're the best starter overs in the world. Can't finish much of anything, baby, but we can flat start over, man. And so I got back with my most frequent wife, as I call her, and we actually bought a new home, got a new car. We changed everything we could. But as you old timers know, wherever you go, there you are. The drunk was still in the middle of the scene, right? And I got thrown out in late 1989, and I lived the last 6 months of my drinking, living in one of my buddy's basements out in the south end of Louisville. And I can't tell you anything miraculous happened there, right? I can tell you this, that on April 12th of 1990, I came into that house very late that night, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. The family was already asleep. I'd been out drinking, and I sit on the edge of the bed. He had 3 beers left in the refrigerator, and I think I drank those. Something happened. I was sitting there, and I got all clammy. I got all prickly. I thought I was having a heart attack. But I was so drunk, I couldn't do anything about it, and I must have passed out. Woke up about 5 a.m. in my clothes, sat up on the edge of the bed, and I felt the same way. I felt prickly. I had that crazy, clammy feeling, and I thought, oh, something's going to happen. But then I can remember thinking, I am so tired. God, I am so tired. I remember saying, I'm so tired, God. I've lost everything again. I lost my wife. I've lost my home. I've lost my kids. I'm about to lose my business. I don't know what to do, And I remember dropping my head and getting up and going and getting in the shower and going into my office. And I'm in a business, you guys, which is really busy. I mean, usually the phone rings all day. There's usually people in and out of my office all day. April 12th, 1990, I sat down at 7:45 in the morning. I didn't move a muscle till noon. 4 hours, 15 minutes. The phone never rang one time. And nobody came in the office that morning. And the book talks about a moment of clarity, and I guess somewhere in this is what happened for me, is that there was this feeling, overriding feeling of it's over, it's over, it's over. I mean, that's all I could think. Didn't even know what that meant, but I reached in my desk drawer. There was a meeting directory of Alcoholics Anonymous, which a guy had given me 2.5 to 3 years before, right? And I'd thrown it in that drawer. It's been there all along. And that was my first visit to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was a Thursday, and I need to tell you, from that day until today, 29 plus years, you guys, what a ride it has been. What a ride it has been. And I'll tell you this, I've laughed sometimes harder than I think my gut can stand in these rooms, right? I've had so much fun. But I need to quickly tell you, I've cried more tears than I thought a guy like me would ever cry. I have felt grief, fear, anger, anxiety like I'd ever thought I could handle. And the reason I say that is, if you're new like I was, and you were thinking that sobriety was going to be about the absence and problems in little Timmy's life, you guys said, oh no, little Timmy, who told you that, Little Timmy, here's what sobriety is about. You're going to get to be part of life and everything that goes with it. And Tim, you're going to get to be there, son, in body, mind, and spirit. And that rang a bell. You know why? My wife used to say to me all the time, Tim, you're not even here when you're here. I'd get so mad. I'd say, what do you mean? Can't you see me? Now, our book talks about it very clearly. We have a disease, threefold disease, body, mind, and spirit. And if you can only bring your body and you can't bring your mind and you can't bring your soul, you can't be a husband, you can't be a dad, you can't be a granddad, you are a body in the room. I didn't get it. I get it today. Because that's exactly all I was, is a body in the room. The reason today, I got 8 grandkids, as I told you. 6 months ago, there were 3 12-year-olds. I sat on the floor with them and played Monopoly for 3 hours. I couldn't give you 3 minutes, 30 seconds of my time and attention at one point in time. And it took me some hard knocks early in my sobriety at 5 years sober and at 10 years sober to understand that not drinking was part of this problem. But there was a bigger problem, and that was me. That my self-centeredness was going to continue to cause harm, for a long time, until I was able to continue to work these steps and ask God to bring some changes into my life and to do something with these incredible self-centered character defects. Because that's exactly what I was. I was a body in the room. Up until 5 years sober, I was a body in the room. My mind still couldn't be there, and certainly my soul was nowhere close to being there, And I say that because those of you who've been around a while, you know what the journey of the 12 steps is all about, We don't tell new people when they show up. They'd all leave. But that it's going to be about changing pretty much everything about you, right? And certainly that's been my journey, with this whole thing. So anyway, I showed up in the Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't do it right. I didn't have a sponsor. I didn't have a home group. And I certainly hadn't gotten near a step, I'll tell you that. So for 14 months, I just kind of did an audit on Alcoholics Anonymous. I was swinging around to your meeting. Didn't want to stay too long, for God's sakes, and get caught. I'd stay on the move. And, man, I was miserable, though. I was so angry. I had a lot of anger issues. And if you'd have ran into me about that time and said, hey, Tim, how you doing, buddy? You happy, joyous, and free? I'd said, yeah, you idiot, and knock you down. I mean, I was crazy, crazy angry. And I was in a meeting one night, and I was, spitting out about how angry I was. And I told this old man, I said, I can't even go to sleep at night, man. My head is just spinning, 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 spinning. He said, Tim, just lay there and go, God is love. God is love. God is love. And that's how I went to bed every night in early sobriety, and I still do sometimes if I can't sleep. But 14 months, drier than a bone, God is love was not getting it done. I thought if I call that little sucker one more time, he gives me God is love one more time, I'm going to knock him out, you know. And sure enough, I called him, and sure enough, he said, Tim, just remember, son, God is love. I said, man, I know that. But I'm so angry and I'm so depressed. And he started laughing. He went, ha, 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 good. I remember thinking, what do you mean good? He said, Tim, listen to this. In Alcoholics Anonymous, God is love, but love is action. God is love. Steps 1, 2, 3, your powerlessness, his power. Steps 4 through 9, your simple responsibility to clean up your mess. Step 10 is a refresher course every day. Step 11 hooks you up with your God. Step 12 hooks you up with us. Tim, what do you say, buddy? Are you ready? I said, yes, sir, I am ready to do something. Because I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to kill you, you know? And that was the day he put me in, sent me down to Lambton Baptist Church, and I became the coffee maker there on Wednesday morning. And that was the day he put me into a men's big book group to this very day. Meets in my office every Wednesday night from 5:45 to 7. And that was the day. And that was the day, Ryan, you know what I found out? I found out what the greatest secret in Alcoholics Anonymous is. You know what that is? I found out where the fun is. Fun's in the middle, man. Fun is in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know that, not out there on the edges where I was. It's in the middle with people who are meeting in that book study like you got on a weekly basis, that are into service, that are making the coffee, that help put on stuff like this. These type of people are having a ball. You know, my miserable butt out there on the outside, I never realized how much fun you guys were having. And I guess what I've saying is I've never since then got out of the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that's where the joyous people are. That's where the gifts, the ultimate gifts reside. And so if you don't hear anything today and you're new, you know, if you're new to this, get in the middle. Get with these guys who are putting on stuff like this and ask for things to do. Man, I used to go over there Wednesday morning. I used to wear a suit and tie every morning. So we have 150 people show up every morning, right, 3 days a week. And if I don't get that coffee on, we're going to have some angry people, right, to show up at 10 o'clock. And I'd get those coffee grounds all over my white shirt, and I'd be cussing and this and that. But as I look back on it, it was the greatest time in my sobriety, right? Because finally God was getting across to me, Tim, you are here, not for you any longer. You're here only to serve my kids. You know, and we're going to learn this in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. And so, you know, that's been so valuable to me. You know, also, I wanted to share, you heard there through the 80s things weren't going well. I owed $250,000 to people who really wanted it back. And I thought that was terrible. I mean, I'm trying to get sober and everything, and all these people could think about was money. You know, God. Man, it was awful. And I tell you what, you guys, I'd go into my office every day, right? And I'd start shuffling papers back and forth. You know, and that fear would start to set in. Of course, I'm a drunk. I'm trying to think about one big deal to come up with $250,000, right? And about 10 o'clock, that fear would get so great that by 10:30, I'd be back in my apartment, crawled up like a ball, right? I mean, it was shut me down. And again, you know, I was at a meeting one night, whining about my business is going bankrupt. I end up going home and, you know, sleeping most of the day. And this old man says, see me after the meeting. Tell me about your business. So I said, all right, what do you want to know? He said, just see me after the meeting. So I see this guy. He says, tell me about your business. I said, what do you want to know? He said, just tell me about it. I said, okay, well, we open at 8 o'clock. He said, good, Tim, be there at 8 o'clock. Not 8:05, not 8:10. Tim, you be there at 8 o'clock. What's next? I said, well, I go on sales calls. He said, good, go on your sales calls. What's next? I said, well, I go to lunch. He said, good, Tim, go to lunch. And Tim, come back from lunch. Good point. What's next? I said, well, I'll come in and do my paperwork. What's next? I said, well, work's over at 4:45. He said, good. Go home, have dinner with your family, go to your meeting, come home, say your prayers. And then he slammed me with a big one. He said, Tim, do the same thing the next day. And I was like, wow, what a concept. Like you do that every day, huh? You know, my sponsor, Don, has now since given that a name. He said, Timmy, what that man was telling you is your job is to do the stitches and leave the patterns up to God. You do the stitches, Timmy, and leave the patterns up to God. And that sounds so great, right? But what happens to me when I start stitching, I start thinking, oh man, what am I making here? Hat, shirt, pants? And when's it going to be done? They go, no, 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 you just stitch. And we promise God will come up with a better pattern than you could have ever imagined. Okay, you guys, so I start doing this, right? I said, okay, I get there at 8 o'clock. I go to sales calls. I'm doing it every day. Every day for about 6 weeks. I still owe $249,740. I mean, I'm going, man, this is a slow boat here. This is a slow boat. But you know what? I'm doing it because the truth is I don't have any other choice, but I keep doing it, right? 6 years later, here's the sequel to the story. 6 years later, I come into my office. My home group's in the morning. 6 phone messages there. 5 of them were AA guys, naturally. And the last one was from a business reporter at our business paper in Louisville. So I call this lady. She says, Mr. Highland, we'd like to do an article on your business as one of the fastest growing of its kind in the Louisville area. And I said, well, God, thank you very much. I'm very impressed with that. And I said to the lady, what is it you'd like to know? She said, sir, what was it that you did that really turned your business around? Now, I want to tell you, I had this one story how I came up with this incredible idea, pulled myself up from my bootstraps, and rocketed this company to success. That ain't what I said, right? I said, well, lady, here's the deal. My office opens at 8. I get there at 8. I go to lunch. I come back from lunch. I went through the whole thing, right? And when I was done, there was like silence on the other end of the phone. And she goes, thank you, sir. We'll see what we can do. And you know what? I knew there wasn't going to be an article, but I knew in my heart, too, that that's exactly the truth. And that's no different today. That what Don tells me, I get up each morning and ask God, what's the next stitch in my AA life, the next stitch in my personal life, the next stitch in my business life? And you know what? It's always right there. The problem with me and the stitches is I'm a big deal guy, right? And the stitches aren't big deals, are they? They're little bitty, simple things that God says, if you just concentrate on doing those, don't worry about the patterns, right? I got them. And when I'm stitching and not worrying about the patterns, it's the best that gets for me. I just wish I could stay there, more often. Also, I'll share this with you. When we, these marital things in our program, we laugh a lot about, are we worse at relationships than normal people? Yeah, we are. But I wanted to share this with you. It's funny to laugh at that stuff today, but I want to tell you nothing was funny about any of it when it was happening, right? Getting divorced when you're drunk is one thing. Losing your marriage when you're sober, a whole different ball game. And when I lost that marriage at 5 years sober, man, I was crushed, crushed. Because I thought I was doing everything I should be doing, man. I'm helping drunks like crazy. I mean, I've got meetings going on. And so, I came to you guys, and you guys said, oh, Tim, we don't know, buddy, but just keep helping drunks, right? Just keep helping drunks. So, I did. I kept helping drunks for, 1 year, kept helping drunks for another year. Going to the 3rd year, I remember thinking, gosh darn God, I don't mind helping drunks, but I sure like to have a female partner to help drunks with. Boom, and there she was, right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Be careful what you pray for, And I want to tell you, though, here she shows up in Alcoholics Anonymous, 5 years more sober than me, invested in the program, and I'm thinking, oh, my God, this is like one of the most perfect AA marriages of all time. I mean, it just look at, I'm sure Bill Wilson was looking down going, oh, this is a great match here. And we had a big AA wedding, and our sponsors were in the wedding, and it was just wonderful, It lasted 8 months. And now I'm 9-10 years sober, and I am on my knees, because this time, it was awful. It was right in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, and people were calling judgments on it. It was embarrassing for both of us. And I was on my knees saying, God, what is so wrong with me? Okay, what's the deal here? I'm trying hard. And I came to you guys, and you guys said, oh, man, we don't know, but just keep helping drunks, Just keep helping drunks. And thank God for that, by the way, because the book says it. It is the one thing that when nothing else makes sense, if you continue to keep a drunk in front of you, the promise is everything is going to be all right. And if there's anything I've done right for 29 years, it's been that, Now, a funny thing happened to me on the way to long-term celibacy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was living at my mom and dad's again because I'd lost my apartment. 10 years sober, I'm living at mom and dad's again, lost my apartment or my home. And so I get a call from, remember my most frequent wife, mother of my children? She calls me, they're down in South Carolina, and she must have heard what happened with my divorce, and she, I guess, felt sorry for me and said, would you like to come down here and spend some time for the kids? And I said, yeah, I'd like to. So I drove down to South Carolina, and I got a separate condo from what they had. And now keep in mind, here are two people, known each other since we were 17 years old, been married and divorced 3 times at this point in time. And for whatever reason, the walls were always so high that we just could never communicate. That weekend, for some reason, we agreed to be friends, and we agreed to be parents and co-parents and co-grandparents. And for some reason that weekend, the walls that were just always so high didn't seem as high, and there was much more of an ease and comfort in our conversation. So I left there, I came back to Louisville, and we started to date. I started taking her out once a week. We had never dated, just got married most of the time. And so I would take her out every Friday night. So I did that about 6 months, 8 months, I guess, and then we finally moved in together. I sold my place and I moved in with her. So let's see, it's about 2002. So we were sitting there one night. I looked at her, and she looked at me. I said, well, what do you think? This coming November 28th will be our 49th gross wedding anniversary. I have no idea what the net is, none. You got to love this story. About 2 years ago, we went to our 50th high school reunion. We walked in there, everyone went, oh, look, they're still together. No way I could tell them that story, right? Let me share this with you. My sponsor, Don, I said to Don, is this kind of crazy? And he said, well, yeah. He said, but Timmy, maybe not. He said, you know why? If our program's about anything, it's about transformation. And you know the thing about transformation? We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to look. And we don't know who's going to be involved. You know why? We don't transform. God does. My friend Bob up in Minnesota says, we plant the seed. We keep the weeds away, we water it, but we don't grow it. God grows it when God's ready to grow it. And I have to tell you, that's got to be what's happened here, because we are the best of friends today. I miss her so much. I hate coming sometimes on these weekends when she can't come, because, we've got 8 grandkids and 2 great-grandchildren today, and we are living just an incredible existence of being true friends to each other. And I don't know why God gave us that, but here's what I do know. Something along the way, and all that insanity and all that craziness, and this is kind of the way it works, God was doing some changing. I could no more change my character defects than I could stop drinking. But I continued to ask God if he could help with that. And somewhere along the way, he changed them just enough in both of us that by the time we got together that last time, they were really 2 different people. Some type of transformation had taken place that we had no play in. Certainly my insanity and her insanity too had nothing to do with it, but God somehow, through our pain mostly, and through our anxiety, see, because what I didn't know, when I got married in the program, my wife today, for the first time, recognized that she had a part in the whole thing and got back into Al-Anon and got back into counseling. Now, I don't know that. And I don't know that it's interesting that my marriage in the program spurred her to get back into recovery. So sometimes, when we think something's happening that's going the wrong way, we just don't know. I heard a little lady that listened to my story once. She said, Tim, it always sounded like in your story you thought you came to a period. She said, Tim, God doesn't use periods. He only uses commas. Only uses commas. The problem is he doesn't tell us what's behind the comma, right? And we have to suit up and show up and stay sober every day and trust that what he's got behind the comma is exactly what he wants for us. And as hard as that is someday, and if right now you're at a spot where you think you're at a period in your life, you're not. There's a comma there. So just hang on. Stay close to Alcoholics Anonymous and stay close to God. You don't know what happened, yeah. So anyway, I'll share this with you. Let me see what time it is here. Real quickly, since I don't usually share this. I didn't share this. I know I didn't share it up in the other place, but if you're new, this is a message to new people. I mean, there's a reason you should hang with old timers and not hang with other guys just like yourself. When I was in early sobriety, there was 3 of us. We're all 2 years sober. And we'd all get together, and I was having trouble with my communications at the time, right? I mean, I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know what to say to people at work. And so us, all 3 geniuses got together, and we would work on this, you know. And so genius number 1 says, well, Tim, just ask people, how can you help them? How can you help them? So I started doing that. Well, how can I help? Put the ball in their court. So I started doing it to everybody. How can I help? How can I help? Hey, how can I help? And it was working pretty good. But then I ran to people who didn't want my help. So I said, what do you do? I went back to the geniuses. I said, what do you tell people who don't want your help? And he said, well, Tim, you tell them, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you feel that way. So now I got 2 of my tools. How can I help? Sorry you feel that way. And then tool number 3, somebody said, Tim, you got to validate people. I said, what do you mean? Yeah, validate them by telling them you might be right. Oh, man, now I got it going, right? I got my tools for living, and I'm killing people with it. I'm going to work doing this. How can I help? Sorry you feel that way. Hey, you might be right. You know, I am like any good drunk. I'm overusing it, right? I left my Tuesday night men's meeting, right? Just spiritual as can be, man. I just remember being up there, and I kind of fly into my kitchen, you know, just on my wings. Sit down in my seat, and all hell's breaking loose in my house, right? My daughter's yelling, my wife's yelling, my son, they're all yelling at each other. I'm sitting there in my chair. My wife comes in the kitchen, I'm getting ready to, she said, don't give me the how can you help shit. And of course I said, honey, I am sorry you feel that way. And she said, you ass. I said, yep, you might be right. Oh, man, here's the deal. I usually have a couple young guys come up and go, hey, what were those 3 things, man? If you use them, you're on your own, all right? I had 3 beautiful babies. I told you about the Christmas baby, and then I had another son who's in business with me today, and then I had a little girl. My little girl was Daddy's little girl. You know, from the beginning when she was a toddler, her first little phrase was, I'll do it myself. Her second little phrase was, you're not the boss to me, you know? I thought, oh, man, here we go. And sure enough, by the time she was 12 years old, I'm finding half pints in her backpack, 6 packs in her closet. I'm chasing her all over the city of Louisville, getting her out of jail for shoplifting, getting in fights, drinking. I mean, you name it, you know, it was on. You know, she was just like her old man. She drank like I did, and she acted like I did. But let me tell you about this kid. I mean, she was tall, blonde, beautiful kid, you know, and really my most talented child. She could do anything she wanted. She was an all-state volleyball player. She was an artist. Everything she wanted to do seemed like she could do, but she loved to drink, man. She loved to drink. And she left about, I guess, 20 years ago now to go to the Art Institute of Chicago on an art scholarship. And I knew she was into her drinking pretty heavy up there, but we hardly saw her very much. Once in a while she'd come home, and then she joined a thing called the Second City in Chicago into the performing arts where John Belushi and all those guys went through. And then she left there and she went to Los Angeles, to the Second City in Los Angeles, drove out there. And we didn't see her then for 2 years. But all we did know is she was living in her car in the streets of Los Angeles with her little dog on a liquid diet alone. And one of the bigger problems with that is, in addition to her alcoholism, she had an eating disorder. So if you're only drinking, living on a liquid diet, living in a car, you know, things are not going to go well, right? And I remember a couple years after that, she came home for the first time, and it was one of those visions, you know, you'll never forget. You know, here's my little baby girl. Her eyes are caved in, cheeks are collapsed, teeth are falling out, hair's all matted to her head. You know, her ribs she was so thin you could count her ribs through her T-shirt. And I remember asking her, and I'll never forget the answer either. I said, honey, is there anything that we can do to help you? And she snapped around and looked at me. It's like those little beady alcoholic eyes and said, Dad, if I ever need your help, you can be sure that I will call you. Boom, she got in her car and went back to Los Angeles. You know, and I knew, you guys, that she just couldn't live very long like that. I knew sooner or later there had to be a phone call. About 5 weeks later, the phone did ring. Good news, it was her. The bad news, by that time, she was so weak, she was whispering over the phone, living in that car. Now, I'm 12 years sober at the time. I'm helping a lot of guys. I usually never, ever have a problem when anybody calls me for help. But I'm going to tell you something. When it's your little girl and she's 3,000 miles away and you can't get to her, oh, what went through my mind was, hey, Tim, what do you think about the A&A now, buddy? Is it good enough for your little girl? And what about those 12 steps, big boy? Is it good enough for your little baby? And the big one was, Tim, what about the God of your understanding that you think so great? Is it good enough for your little girl? And I need to tell you guys, I mean, as a daddy, it didn't seem to be good enough. I mean, all I could think about, I'm going to get on an airplane, go out and bring that kid home. You know? But for some reason, what came out of my mouth was, honey, here's a man's phone number in Los Angeles in Alcoholics Anonymous. I pray and I hope that you will call him and ask him for help. And I hung up that phone, you guys, and I cried, I mean, the rest of the day. And I'm thinking, what did I just do? You just killed your own kid, Tim. What did you do? You know? But somewhere also deep down inside of me, what I knew to be the truth was, Tim, you gave her the only thing that I know that's worked consistently and persistently for people like me and you. Not only for the last 84 plus years now, and all of mankind, the only thing is Alcoholics Anonymous. And what your responsibility statement says, Tim, anytime, anywhere, someone's reaching out, the hand of AA is always got to be there, and for that we're responsible. It doesn't say, unless that's your kid. So somehow I knew I had extended the hand of AA to her by giving her that phone number. Whether or not she was going to call and take that hand was totally out of my power, you know? And that's hard, hard, hard when that's your kid, you know? And I say this, you know, I'm very happy to share with you that this past July, just last month, you know, that baby girl of mine celebrated 17 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, she's doing great. She sponsors a lot of young women out there. She's got back into her performing arts. She does stand-up comedy. She's having a ball, you know. She's living a great life. She got to be in Founders Day with me. Some of you were up there for that. That was such a special time for the two of us to be together. You know, but I've also thought the other way, is that wonder if it went the other way. Wonder if I had to go out there and bring her home in a box. What I do know is that I wouldn't have come home alone. What I do know is that you all would be there. What I do know that, you know, you would be there no matter what happened. And, you know, that's not the case everywhere in the world. And I guess I'm sure a lot of you have experienced the same thing. I have buried a lot of guys that I've tried to sponsor in the last 29 years. I never like it. We just buried one, was real close with our group over here, who had 8 years sober and fell off the path. But I do know this, you know, that we have the fellowship in this wonderful thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, and that the people will always be there, that we never ever have to be alone no matter what happens in our personal life, you know, and what a gift that is. You know, I'll just share this with you. Also, the man's number that I gave her, and I'm going to use his name because he's passed away a couple years ago. The man's name I gave the number to was named Scott Redmond. And Scott was a Jewish man from New York living in Los Angeles. And I said, this is totally Alcoholics Anonymous. God's going to use a Jewish man from New York living in Los Angeles to help this little white Catholic girl from Kentucky, right? What I wanted to share, though, Scott was 26 years sober. I'll be forever grateful. And he passed away about 7, 8 years ago now with pancreatic cancer. But I'll be forever grateful that the night she called him, he answered the bell. The night she called him, he didn't say, look, I'm too busy, honey. I'll have some lady call you tomorrow. I'm glad he didn't say, honey, listen, you know, meet me at a meeting in 2 days or something. He knew somehow that she needed him now. And he got in his car and he fought his way across Los Angeles. He answered the bell, 26 years sober. And I say that because sometimes when we get up in ages, up in sobriety, we think, well, that's for the new guys to do. I'm glad it wasn't just for the new guys to do with Scott Redmond, because I'd have a different story to tell you today. So we're all going to go back to other home groups, as you said, you know, and someday, somewhere, it's going to be somebody else's grandkid, somebody else's kid, and you're going to get the call, or I'm going to get the call. And I hope I'll suit up and show up like he did that night. Thank you all.
Alice.